Hey, I'm John Greaves III, and I'm the founder of Garage Gym Life, and this is my very first interview from my office. Usually I do these things down in my home gym, but we said we're going to give it a shot at doing it up here in my home office because today I'm joined by James Hobson, the founder of Spider Chalk. And so I'm interested and excited to hear all about chalk. And if you guys are interested in that, we're going to join James and hear all about it right after this. Hey, if you want to support our channel, plus grab the perfect finishing touch for your home gym, go ahead and grab one of our 16-ounce laminated vinyl banners from our online store. They are easy to hang and easy to clean with just soap and water, and a great way to show that you represent the Garage Gym lifestyle. Order yours today. Hey, James, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, good to be here.
I don't know if this is the strangest thing you've ever heard, to hear that somebody is excited to learn about chalk. But hey, there are videos on YouTube where people just watch people crush chalk. So how weird can it be? Am I the first person ever excited to find out about chalk from you?
You might be, because most people find chalk extremely boring. I'm not very popular at parties. People typically ask me what I do, and then I start to tell them what I do, and then you can see them glaze over and they start to kind of look past me. So
like, don't invite him anymore. Don't invite him anymore.
This is probably the least sexy job that I've ever had. And I've had some pretty cool jobs, but yeah, I mean, the chalk industry is very cool. And once you really get into it, it is interesting to learn about.
Your chalk is useful for climbing, but it's slightly different. So can you explain the difference between chalk that is specific for climbing and Spider Chalk?
Yeah, Spider Chalk's not made in China.
All
chalk, every single brand of chalk in the entire country in the United States is made in China, with the exception of a couple brands of gymnastics chalk, which is made in Taiwan. They all look the same. They're all 2 ounces in the blocks. All the powder comes on the same container ship. It's a giant racket. And
so it doesn't matter if it's got Vikings on it, if it's got unicorns on it. Okay. All right.
It's all a giant scam. I've said this on half a dozen podcasts. We've done blogs about it. We've made videos about it. No one disputes it. I've come directly at other companies and said, your chalk is the exact same chalk that someone can get at Walmart, at Dick's Sporting Goods, at Rogue. It's all the same chalk. And nobody responds to that. They hate it when we mention that, because what they want is, they want to say, well, we have performance grade chalk. We have professional grade chalk. What
does that mean?
Really nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. You can say anything you want. Is that a performance polo you're wearing? Sure it is.
Dang right. I'm an athlete.
It's also a golf polo. It's also a church polo. You know what I mean? It's a workout polo. It's any polo you want it to be, right?
Right.
You just got to call it whatever name you want. It's the same thing with this. So the difference between climbing chalk, gymnastics chalk, weightlifting chalk, gym chalk, it's all the same stuff. There's only a couple factories in China that make chalk. There's 1 or 2 in Taiwan, and they ship on these giant container ships. They bring in these 40-foot containers, dozens of them at a time. They hit the port, and it gets distributed out to REI and Dick's Sporting Goods and Walmart. It doesn't matter where you go. And if you really want to find out the truth, go look at the import records. Type in any company that sells chalk, their name, into the import records, and it comes up.
Where would you go to find import records?
You go to Google and you type in United States import records. There's probably 24 websites.
Okay.
Public information. Anytime a company imports anything from outside this country, as soon as it hits the border and you have to pay taxes and duties on it, it automatically flags that company as being an importer. And you can go back and you can trace every single company where they buy their chalk from, the amount that they buy as well. So not just the port where they bought it from, the port where it landed, and the amount of volume. So if it says they bought 500 kilograms, then you know that they were dealing with about 1 pallet worth of material. And that's the same thing for knee sleeves, wrist wraps, jump ropes. 95% of the companies that sell fitness equipment in the United States, 95% of them get their equipment from China. And you know the exact port it's hitting, the container size, how many pallets it is, everything. And yet on their website, they try to make it sound like American owned, American made, veteran owned. None of that stuff matters. It's all coming from China.
Why is it important for you to make your own chalk? To go to the trouble of learning how to make chalk and go through that whole process. Why was that important?
Okay, so what we're talking about is magnesium carbonate. Magnesium carbonate is the white powder. That's made by a company here in the United States. We buy it from them. That's not going to happen much longer. The company that we've partnered with for 6 years that makes the chalk that we use, and we form it into other products. We form it into blocks. We make our own pouches, chunky chalk, liquid chalk. Everything is done on site. We don't make powder chalk. The powder chalk is made by a laboratory, and it's a process where it's a chemical reaction, and they have to have these huge mega facilities so they can make this massive chemical reaction. They typically do anywhere from 10 to 25,000 kilos a year. So it's pretty high volumes. We don't do that much volume. We're just taking a small piece of it. The United States.
Hold on. That company that makes that chalk, do they then send it to China?
I don't know where they send it to, but I know that
that's a lot of chalk, and I know you're not using all of it. So
yes,
you're saying that
all of it, but the majority of chalk in the United States is moved in industrial. So freight trains ship a lot of magnesium carbonate. Obviously full truckloads, so 18-wheelers. When we first got started, I remember calling some of these companies and saying, does anybody make chalk? And they said, no, nobody makes chalk in America. Well, we found somebody that we could buy from, and we said, we want a bag of chalk. And they thought, well, a bag? We can't sell you a bag of chalk. You need at least a truckload of chalk. Well, a truckload, who's got $40,000 laying around?
Yeah.
So it was tough. This is manufacturing in America, is that there is no such thing as micro manufacturing in America. You're either a huge whale or you don't do it. And so in the beginning, it was very tough for us to get started because we had a budget of like $2,000 a month. I mean, and then you approach bottling companies and they say the same thing. They say, well, we have 1,000-piece order minimum. 1,000 pieces? What if this doesn't sell? What do you do with the other 950, right? Well,
right.
If you're going to manufacture, you got to have deep pockets.
Yeah, they've made their sale. Yeah, they're like, I don't care.
Okay, so going back to the Mag Carb, the reason we're about to separate ourselves from this United States company is because they think they've got us. The website says Made in America. Everything on our packaging says Made in America. Every time we call them, they double the price. So now the price is this. Now the price is that. Now they're tacking on extra shipping. Now they're tacking on freight. Now they've got a fuel surcharge. And they look at us and they say, listen, we know we've got you. For 6 years, you've been buying from us. And we can charge you whatever we want and you're stuck. But over the last few months, I've done some work. I've got a lab in Brazil and a lab in India that are both working on duplicating what we're getting here. And I think we're really close to being able to copy it, if not improve on it. And if that's true, I'm going to buy from either India or Brazil and we'll start importing. The difference is the lab has to do it to our specs. It doesn't work if it doesn't meet our specifications. I can't buy chalk from China or Taiwan. That's pre-made. They're making hundreds of thousands of tons of chalk a year. And that's sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So I have to buy what they already have. I can't do that. It doesn't work in our machines. What I need is someone who can say, how much do you need? And then 6 weeks later, they make it and then ship me what I need directly to my specs. So we'll have a lab in India and a lab in Mexico. I just got a sample the other day and it was phenomenal. It blew my mind. It's less than half the price of what we're paying for the chalk in America. And so pretty soon I hope that we'll be able to import from these other countries, because right now we can't compete. The price keeps going up. I can't continue to raise our prices every month.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. I mean, pretty soon on Amazon, you're paying more for, a block of chalk than you would be for a filet mignon steak. Yeah. People can't do that.
If you're going to be importing from India and Brazil, Mexico, not so much, but India and Brazil, you're going to run into the same issue that anyone who imports fitness equipment has, which is the first batch, the sample they send you, QCR is amazing. It's perfect. Then when you get to around batch, maybe the third or fourth time they ship you something, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's too expensive for you to fly over there every time they make a batch of stuff for you. Yeah. How are you going to keep the quality control high enough to make sure that it meets your specs?
You're right. You're absolutely right, because several of our competitors that were buying from China went out of business. So I approached the owners and I said, hey man, what happened? And they said, the first 3 orders were great. And then that 4th order, they just sent us basically fake chalk.
Yeah.
And they said, gotcha.
Yeah.
They built up that trust, and then you made your largest order ever. So you grew your company, grew your brand, and all of a sudden you make a massive investment, which is every dollar you have in the bank. And once they clean you out, they have no more purpose for you. And so they'll screw you over in a heartbeat. And that's a risk. It's a risk for us. But we have people who are going to act as intermediaries. So essentially, we will not even show up on the import records. We'll have importers import for us on our behalf. And the way we do that is they order from this lab, they mark it up 25 to 30% and charge us, right?
Right.
So we're going through them. Now, why do I want to pay 30% more when I could just approach this same lab in India? Because if it doesn't meet my specs, they eat the bill.
So essentially you're paying, I guess, an on-site inspector. Somebody to just be, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Second thing is, right now you could say American made. Yes. So are you going to change your labeling?
No. And here's why. Our liquid chalk, made in America because we make it in my garage.
Okay.
Our blocks are made in America because we take the powder and we make it in our outbuilding.
Okay.
So look at it this way. If someone buys thread from China, white thread from China, and then they bring it in these massive quantities, and then they make socks out of it, and they make shirts out of it, and they make underwear out of it, and it says made in America, right? That's because the thread was not made here, but the thread is not what you're buying. You're buying underwear. You're buying a completed shirt. You're buying a polo with buttons on it. You're buying pants with a zipper on it, right? So everything made in America, it doesn't mean that the thread was made in America. It doesn't mean that the button was made in America. It doesn't mean the zipper was made in America. It means the final product was made in America. So, and that's the same with us. We can say made in America because the only thing that won't be made in America is the raw materials.
So how is that different from when I order furniture and it's made in Mexico, then brought across the border and assembled in the US, and then it says assembled in America, assembled in the USA?
So there are very specific laws about what qualifies as made in America.
Okay.
And so we have these conversations all the time. And there's certain things like, for instance, where does our alcohol, where does our rosin come from? Well, our rosin isn't made in the United States. We import our rosin from various countries over in Asia. That's where all the good rosin is, you know. We put rosin in our liquid chalk. So when you start looking at the ratios of liquid chalk, what is—
And the rosin is kind of what makes it sticky, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, if we start dumping in a ton of rosin and we cut back on the other stuff, now all of a sudden, are we truly made in America because we're using something else? We have to put assembled in America at a certain point.
Gotcha.
And I believe the number was 70%. So it's like 70% of your materials have to come from America in order to be called made in America. And that also works for fitness. A perfect example is Sorinex. Are you familiar with Sorinex?
Yeah.
So we private label Sorinex as chalk for them. Bert Sorinex and Richard Sorinex, really good guys. They approached us a few years ago. They're only a couple of hours from where I grew up. They're really good guys. And they said, we want chalk made in America. It was the first private label I ever did. They made a massive order. They're a really good company. They're all about supporting American businesses.
Yeah.
One of the reasons they ordered chalk from us is because in order to get government contracts, 70% of the available product on their website has to be made in America.
Okay.
So they can order 30% of their stuff from China, but the other 70%. So anytime they find somebody that's making something in America, they buy it because then it gets them over that 70% threshold so they can continue to get government contracts.
And you'll still be able to qualify for that. Yeah. You have a lot of passion about it. Even when we had our conversation on Instagram, you were talking about the Made in America thing. Why does that matter to you so much?
Yeah, I think it matters because right now there's a push on Instagram and Facebook and with the younger generation that everybody's hustling. Andrew Tate's made it worse. Everybody needs to make $1 million in order to be relevant, right?
Yeah.
You don't have $1 million, you're invisible to women and nobody respects you and
yeah.
You're a big fat loser. So now what happens is when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, they ask these high school kids, what do you want to do for a living? The number one answer for high school kids of what they want to do when they grow up is they want to be an influencer.
Yeah.
And part of that is it's not about creating something. It's not about inventing something. It's not seeing a challenge or a hole or a problem and trying to fix that problem. That doesn't matter to them because it doesn't give them status. What matters to the millennial generation and a lot of guys even our age, they're stuck in the corporate world, and so that they want some kind of out. So they take these easy routes. Well, I'll drop ship. I'll start a Shopify and I'll drop ship all this nonsense from Wish and all this Chinese garbage. And then what happens is someone gets it. It's a little drone for their child. And then 60 seconds later, that drone crashes into the wall and shatters into a bunch of pieces. Well, it costs 75 cents to make in China. And so people look at things that way and they go, well, whatever, I don't care. You know what I mean? I made my money. I charged you $12 for that thing that cost me 75 cents. Well, the mom calls and says, my son's toy broke that you made. Not meaning that he didn't make it. It's some company in China. And they don't care. The customer service is out the window. It's all about making that money. Here's my thing. you can do both. You can still make money while you invent something, right?
Right.
I grew up in a generation of men who built houses and built their garages, and they fixed their own vehicles. And sometimes they buy old cars and they would fix them up. And everybody was inventing and everybody was creating. And there was all this passion around America because we're capitalist and we have these intelligent, educated people that could solve all these problems. And over the last 20 years, no one cares about solving problems anymore. It's all about making quick cash. 18 months is how long it took me to figure out how to make chalk. When I say chalk, I mean blocks specifically, but how to compress blocks. No one had ever figured it out. And the Chinese and the Taiwanese have 100% market share. Why? Because no one in America wanted to spend their time to really sit back and say, how can we do this? Why are we buying it from them? We've got 350 million people in the United States. Some of the smartest people in the world live in our country. And yet no one is solving these issues. So for me, I look at it as not necessarily that I'm passionate about chalk as much as I am passionate about solving problems. And I reject the notion that if you don't make a ton of money really fast, then it's not worth pursuing. Constantly, I'm approached by people that say, I've got this great idea. And I always tell them the same thing. I go, I love your idea. I can't wait to hear about it. You call me 1 year from now. And if you're still doing it, we'll work together. Guess how many people call me back 1 year later?
You're 100% at zero, right?
None. Not a single person has ever called me back 1 year later, because over the course of the 12 months, they're hot, they're excited, they're passionate. 12 months later, they've lost all their passion, all their drive, all their motivation. They were never really motivated by the project. They were motivated by the money that they thought they would make. And if they're not driving a Mercedes and living in a $500,000 home, and they're not buying expensive dinners and flying jets like Andrew Tate, then they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And so what that does is it puts me in a position where I say, like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want my children to be like that. And so it's worth pursuing. It's worth taking 18 months of your life and spending your life savings if you passionately believe in the reasons behind the project, not necessarily the project, but the why behind the project. Right. And here's the other thing, John. That's why I'm so disappointed about equipment companies, because you name 5 companies right now, and I'll name 5 companies, and I don't think a single one of those are making the majority of their products in America. The majority of the products in the fitness industry are made overseas and shipped over. And it drives me nuts. It's because they're sheer profit-driven laziness. There's lots of ways to make equipment in America. You can do it, but you really have to be passionate about it. And
I want to shift gears a little bit, because there are some other things, some questions that I'm sure you get all the time. Number one, do you sponsor athletes?
No.
Okay. And and is that because you guys are a smaller operation, or is it because you don't see the return on investment? Because a lot of people get upset because they look at companies sponsoring athletes as giving back to the people who buy their products, right? And kind of like giving back to the sports that make your product possible. What is your stance on it, and why don't you sponsor athletes?
There's 2 reasons. One, the return on investment is terrible. You'll sink $1,000 into a kid that's got 500,000 followers on Instagram, and you'll sell $800 worth of stuff.
Yep.
Are you familiar with Untamed Strength?
Is that Alan Thrall?
Yes.
Yeah.
I approached Alan a couple of years ago, and I said, Alan, I want to send you some chalk for your gym. He said, yeah, man, this is over Instagram. I sent him a box of chalk. I didn't tell him he had to do a review. I didn't ask him anything. 2 weeks later, out of nowhere, I saw like 400 or 500 orders come in on one day. And I thought, well, this is odd. We don't usually get 400 to 500 orders.
It's because of the
and all of a sudden I looked on YouTube, and boom, he had done a YouTube video. The weirdest thing about that is Alan Thrall's not sponsored by anybody. He's just a good guy. And there's sponsored athletes who are always slinging some kind of coupon code. People know they're sponsored. People know that they're incentivized, meaning they're getting a cut. And I think they generally disregard that. Someone like Alan Thrall, who of his own efforts just decided that this was worth a 15-minute video. I think we're up to 400,000 views or something on YouTube on that video. He is, not me. I didn't do anything about it. But But that moved the needle. Even to this day, I mean, I still get 4 or 5 orders a week from people that are using his little coupon code in his video. And those kind of things I love, because you're not sponsoring him. You're telling a gym owner or a weightlifter, and you're saying, hey, I want to send you some stuff. And that's it. That's the extent of the conversation. And I don't follow up with them or anything. I just say, hey, I just want to send you some free stuff.
I can vouch for that. When you sent me the box of chalk, you just like, actually, that was a fairly interesting conversation when you said, when you asked me if I'd ever got any chalk. And I said, no, nobody's ever offered to send me chalk. And you said, you know, like, you were surprised by that. And then you sent me the chalk. And if you're watching this channel, you see my review. If you haven't, click up there and I'll put a link to it and you guys will be able to check it out. I'm actually pretty proud. You made me smile because you said that I was the most comprehensive review anybody had ever done. And to me, that's kind of like it's kind of like the give back, because when somebody sends me something, I think that my job is, I have a duty at that point to both the person who sent me the thing and to the viewer, in that I need to be as thorough as possible. Now, I grant you, I come from a journalism background. So my degree is in communications. And so I apply the same, not burden of proof, but the same journalistic skepticism, I guess, to everything. And I also feel like I need to be neutral. So it's not my job to be a cheerleader for your product. It's my job to say, well, I got it. Here's what happened after I got it. These are the questions that I asked that I anticipated you might want to know the answers to. And I take that approach with everything that I review. At the same time, because of that low return on investment, that's why companies are doing the affiliate marketing thing, which is what you're seeing when you see a sponsored athlete. So let's say they tell you, okay, you'll use my code to save 10%. That's because typically you can get a 15% discount. Well, instead of giving you 15% off, the company says, all right, we'll give you the person 5%, and we'll give the person who orders with your code 10%. And essentially, they're telling you to be a salesperson for their company for 5% commission. And that's why I don't do it, because I don't know a single salesperson in the world who would you sell a car for 5% commission? I'm not doing it. My time is valuable. I'm not doing that. But I'm not knocking anybody else who wants to do that. I'm just saying that I do understand that. And I understand from your standpoint too. It's like, you're not going to get the return on investment if you sponsor an athlete. Do you sponsor events?
We used to. And then what happened was our logo got up on 50, 60 events over the course of a few years. And now I get 1 to 2 to 3 emails a day. People asking, can you support my strongman? Can you support my charities too? We're doing this to raise money for so-and-so's leukemia, whatever. And what happens with that is you can drain the coffers pretty quick. Let's say you have 5,000 units in inventory and you say, well, I'll send you, they all want, like, well, we have, 10 first place prizes and this, 8 women and 8 men. So can you just send us 16?
Oh yeah, that's all.
Oh, well, 16, right. But that's 16 times 2 a day.
Right.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden we're shipping 32 units a day. And when you say no to someone, then they email back and they go, why'd you do his?
Right. I got you.
You did that guy's event, but you didn't do mine. Mine's about leukemia. His is about, raising money for firefighters. Why not? You don't like kids or something? And then, so you get into a lot of hot water. So we finally just pulled the plug on it. But one more thing I wanted to say about the sponsorship thing is Go Strong equipment, before they got bought by Rogue, the owner of Go Strong sent me a message maybe a year and a half ago. And he said, we ran a survey on Instagram that said, what chalk brand do you use? And he said, we shut it down after an hour because I think he said there were 23 responses in the first hour and 22 of them said spider chalk.
Yeah.
And so he messaged me and he said, I had no idea that you guys even existed, but holy cow, like that's 22 out of 23 people who came out and said they use your chalk. And we sent them chalk and they put it in there. They had a showroom for Go Strong. We sent them chalk and they put it in there, and they were going to private label before they got bought by Rogue. But that's another reason why we don't have to. Mm-hmm. Power lifters typically work out in these big gyms with 60, 70, 80 other power lifters. And a guy brings in a box of our chalk and opens it up and sticks it in the chalk bowl. Right next to that is Rogue chalk. So you've got 1 block of Rogue and 1 block of spider chalk. Well, the guys walk over there and they're doing deadlifts, and all of a sudden they do this and the block kind of crumbles or falls away into some pieces. And then the next time they come over there, they grab our block and they rub it. And the second they pick it up, they go, holy cow, right. What is this? And then all the other guys in the gym go, oh man, you haven't heard about these guys? That's spider chalk. So we don't advertise. I don't pay for advertising. We don't pay to market. I'm not really active on Instagram or TikTok or any of that. I'll put 1 picture up every couple of days because I just don't like spending time on it. And that's because the product itself sells. If you go to Amazon or Rogue and you look at the reviews, we have 10,000 plus 5-star reviews on our products. And that's not incentivized. We don't incentivize people to leave those reviews. So my philosophy is if you make something that's truly better, you don't need to spend money advertising. I'll tell you who needs to spend money on advertising. People who buy crap from China, slap their label on it, and then try to convince people that their jump rope is better than everybody else's jump rope, which was also made in the same factory in China. Your jump rope has no advantage. No one can tell the difference between that and the Walmart jump rope. So you have to pay people to say it's better, right? I don't need to pay people. I will never pay people to say Spider Chalk is better. I also don't need to pay to advertise because word of mouth has done that for us.
What's something that you wish people knew about chalk in general or about your business, but nobody's ever thought to ask you?
I guess one of the things that people don't really ask me a lot is what is the difference between your chalk and the chalk that is made overseas? They go, well, it's better, but what makes it better? And nobody thinks to ask that question. They just assume that it's better and there's just some intangible reason, or they trust us, I guess. They say, well, you make it, you know, and you must know what you're talking about. And so no one really asks. The answer to that question is,
well, you just answered one thing because you were talking about the doesn't crumble.
Yeah, so that's our blocks. Our blocks are clearly different because they're compressed. So you take the average 2-ounce block and you put 3 of those, and then you compress it into one block. That helps because it doesn't crumble in your hands, and when you rub it, it doesn't come off too much. So that same block will last you. In fact, when we sent out the free block, we told people, we said, you get a free block, you paid for shipping. I expect you to order again in 6 months. Yeah. Because it takes 6 months to use this one block. Right. And people thought, that's a big fat lie. I go through a block every 8 days. That's the responses we got. There's no way, dude. You're just a big fat liar. Yeah. That was maybe a month ago. 2 days ago, I sent an email out to those same people and said, this is the title of the email was, were we lying? And the first line was, were we lying about it lasting 6 months? And we got dozens of people that said, you were not lying, dude. This is dead serious. This block lasts forever. So that's our blocks. Just in powder. Like, what are we looking for when we go to these labs in India and Brazil? What we're looking for is, first of all, it has to be 100% pure magnesium carbonate. That's the first thing. China and Taiwan do not sell 100% pure magnesium carbonate. They don't do it. Okay. There's no way you can make it and
they're fillers, right?
What now?
You said there were fillers in there.
There's definitely fillers in there. Now, what you're paying for is you're paying for purity. So the more refining this process does and the cleaner it gets, the more expensive it gets, and it's escalating. At $1 a pound, you're getting dirt. At $4 a pound, you're getting somewhere, right? Okay. Now it's getting good. Yeah. At $12 a pound, now you've got really good chalk. So it goes from $1 to $4 to $12. $12 chalk is good chalk. $4 chalk, $1 chalk, don't breathe it in. Don't put it on your hands. Lord knows what's in that stuff, right? Yeah. So purity is a big part of it. The second thing is bulk density, how fluffy it is. If it has a good grind on it, the size of the particles, which is all measured via laboratory. So there's several pieces that go to the puzzle that make it better. We have to have a specific type of chalk in order to work in our machine, and also what we feel like lasts longest on the hand. If you do the Pepsi challenge and you get 2 brands of chalk, ours being on one side, theirs being on the other, and you dip your fingers in it and then you rub your hands, do it 100 times, count to 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 100. Then look at your fingers. You know which one is ours. You can feel it while you're doing it, but also when you look at the hand, this one has no chalk on it. This is the $4 bag of chalk off of eBay. This is our chalk. Still got chalk on the fingers, still feels dry. The second thing is when you spit on your hands, so mimicking sweat, you take your hand, that same chalk on both hands, you go, and then you rub it. This one gets slimy. It starts to feel slimy. You go, ooh, it feels like I put like lube on my hand. Right. This one over here, after once or twice, all of a sudden it's back to dryness. Okay. And that has to do with, again, how pure it is, the grind of it, and then the bulk density. So for us, we look at it and we say, there is definitely some science to it. Just saying it's professional grade or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. It has to come down to the details. We get what's called a COA, or certificate of analysis. The certificate of analysis is where a laboratory third party comes in and looks at it and says, these are the specifications that it meets. Okay. So that's what makes our chalk better. And that's what we're looking for when we go to India and Brazil, is we want it to meet those very high, strict regulations, you know, that meets those properties.
So when you put chalk on your hands, let's say the liquid chalk, because we've talked a lot about the block chalk. You put the liquid chalk on your hands, And, you do the, I showed you my scientific process in the video. I just squirted it and I did like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Right. And I try not to do anything weird because I said, I'm trying to stand in the place of someone else who's using it. And that's pretty much what they're going to do. Squirt some on, wave the hands around. All right, let's go lift the bar. After about, let's say I'm doing something with a kettlebell, right? Within the kettlebell handle is going to rotate in your hand a lot, all right? As opposed to a deadlift where it's going to rotate, but it's not as much. After a while, your hand looks like there's nothing on it, right? Just because of the the friction from the kettlebell handle rotating. Do you still need to apply more chalk for the purposes of retaining the adhesion? Or is it okay that you don't actually, like, you can't see it with your naked eye?
Yeah. So there's two camps on this. One is some people have a weird obsession with chalk, meaning that like before they go do bench press, they'll chalk up. But why do you need chalk for bench press, right? It sits there in the palm of your hand. It doesn't really rotate much. For stuff like cleans where you have to pull it off the ground, or deadlifts, you have to pull. That's a pulling motion. So you want that extra enhanced grip. But the bar on a bench, you're not pulling, right? You're pushing. So it sits in the palm of your hand. But, right. So why do men chalk up on bench press? I've even seen guys put a strip across their chest, right? So
I can't answer that, but with the bench press, you're supposed to be pulling the bar apart.
Right.
So your grip surface.
So I see guys go crazy on the bench press, and also they'll chalk their back on squats, and they'll chalk their hands on squats and whatever. And a lot of that I feel like is mental. If you're in an environment where everybody's chalking up all the time, it gives you this peace of mind, right? It's part of the routine. You take the belt, you open the belt up and you close the belt. Well, why do you open it and close it? Open it and close it. Well, 3 times. Why do baseball players click their shoes and rub their head and pull their shorts down?
Yeah.
Because it's part of the routine. So there's that side of it. And for those folks, we tell them like, look, you want some chalk on your hands? Sure. You got to wait 20 seconds for it to dry. Will it enhance your grip? Yeah. It might enhance your grip a little bit. There's another group of people, and this is the CrossFit community tends to go this way, which is I don't need to chalk up in the middle of a 15-minute Metcon if I still have grip. So we had a guy do a video. He was a CrossFit owner maybe 5 or 6 years ago when we first got started. And he said, I love this chalk. It gives me insane grip. I'm right in the middle of a Metcon and I'm grinding out butterfly pull-ups and I still have grip. And he holds his hand up and he goes, you can't see any chalk right now. But when I grab that bar, I get no slipper or any rotation on that bar. And that's because in the CrossFit community, they want to chalk up the least amount possible because it takes up so much time.
Right, because they're doing stuff for time.
Yeah, right.
I got you.
So I feel like there's kind of these two camps, which is if you're sitting there and you got a mandatory 3 minutes between sets on SBD, right? Your squat, your bench, your deadlift. You got to do minimum 3 minutes. Everybody says that. So there's all this time in the gym where guys are just kind of hanging out. Well, you see them squirt liquid chalk in their hands because that kills 30 seconds, right? And then they're on their phone taking a selfie or doing a video or a TikTok. Well, that kills another minute. So now they really only have a minute and a half between sets, right? So I understand from a practical standpoint, if your hand is still grippy, it's still grippy. One of the things that people used to do back in the day was they used to get sidewalk chalk. It's like, well, that's way cheaper than regular chalk. And I'm gonna put sidewalk chalk in my hand. And that actually works for the first set, the first pull. But calcium carbonate is similar to really cheap magnesium carbonate in that the second your hand starts to perspire, that bar becomes twice as slippery as it would be if you hadn't put the chalk on your hand.
And that's why the practice of rechalking happened because of, okay.
So a lot of people used to approach this in the beginning and go, why is your chalk so expensive? My son has these, big giant sidewalk chalk things. Why can't I use that? And we tell them, we go, well, you can, of course, right? Like all you got to do is just go out there and use it. The problem is after that first set, from then on, your hand is now more slippery than it would have been had you not used chalk at all, right?
Okay.
So in their mind, they're thinking, well, chalk is chalk is chalk. It's not. And our chalk, specifically our liquid chalk, I believe still has great adhesive properties even once the chalk is gone because of the rosin.
Is there any, your chalk has antibacterial properties. Is there any negative consequence for using too much chalk?
I'd say no. We use alcohol. We use ethanol alcohol, and ethanol alcohol is denatured, meaning that like if you were to try to drink it, it would make you sick. That way you're not sitting there getting hammered off of, ethanol. When we mix it into our chalk, it has alcohol in it, which is what makes it antibacterial. It also has enough water for it to sit on your hand long enough to kill that bacteria. If you have 90% alcohol, 10% water, and you put it on your hands, it does not kill the bacteria because the water evaporates just as quickly as the alcohol and it doesn't have enough time to kill that bacteria. But if you make it 70% alcohol with 30% water, now it sits on your hands. So that's how we get our antibacterial properties.
So you just heard it here. He can kill COVID if you would bathe your body in the spider chalk. COVID. Now, there you go.
There's one exception to that. We have a liquid chalk that we don't talk about tremendously, but it's called White Widow. It can definitely be toxic. We put a antiperspirant in it that's aluminum free. Aluminum gets into your pores and then it gets into your body and has some really devastating effects. Like Alzheimer's has been linked back to aluminum zirconium and some of the aluminum. If you use antiperspirant, that's what you're putting in your body. You're putting aluminum in your body. Some people are highly weird about it and some people don't really care. They're just like, whatever, I'm gonna die of something. So at least I'll die smelling good. But we use an antiperspirant that's not aluminum. So it's an aluminum-free antiperspirant. Aluminum as an antiperspirant in Europe is frowned upon, if not completely banned. In the United States, we have a lot of stuff that other countries won't allow, but we allow it here.
Yeah.
So the antiperspirant that we use is hugely popular in Australia, Germany, Europe, in countries that have very strict laws about what you can put on your body. That being said, if you use our White Widow multiple times a day for a long period of time, that antiperspirant does get into your hands and it will keep your hands from sweating, but it also builds up calluses on your hands. So what it does is it basically kills the skin and doesn't allow that hand to be able to sweat. And if you use it too much, it creates like one giant callus on your hand. Gotcha. And I've done that before. So when I first started experimenting with it, I said, well, let me use it on myself and see what happens. Now remember, this is legal in Europe where aluminum's not legal and a lot of other things aren't legal. So they claim that it's perfectly safe for human use. I used it every day, twice a day for about a month. My hands stopped sweating completely. I mean, I was sitting there in the middle of a workout, my shirt's drenched and my hand is completely dry.
Right.
And I also the palm of my hand started to turn yellow. And that was the callus that had on my fingers. Yep. And the whole hand had turned yellow. I stopped using it for 4 or 5 days. That skin eventually sloughed off and the skin underneath it grew back and I was fine. But yeah, so what we tell people with White Widow is we tell them if you use it regularly, let's say once a day, it'll keep you from sweating. If you use it 2 to 3 times a day or use it too often, you will start to get that callus on your hand and you need to back off a couple of days. So that's the only side of our liquid chalk I would say is toxic. The other side of it is people wonder about breathing in chalk. And gymnasts right now, there's a huge epidemic with little gymnast girls getting asthma because they're in the gym all day breathing in chalk while they're doing their floor routine and their balance beam and everything. And they're linking that back to chalk use. One of the reasons why they're breathing in so much chalk is because the Chinese chalk gets airborne.
Right.
They rub it on their hands.
It crumbles.
When they clap, it goes up in the air. And so they're breathing in all this chalk and they're developing asthma. Like 10-year-old, 11-year-old girls are getting asthma from being in the gymnast facility. So ours doesn't go airborne because the chunks are larger. The grind is bigger. So what happens is when they rub it on their hands and they clap, it goes into the air and then immediately settles. And so the air is perfectly clean.
Gotcha.
The second thing is we don't know what's in Chinese chalk. We know they use fillers and there's 5 or 6 things that we've caught them with lab analysis that they're putting in their chalk, but they change that based on what the going rate is. So let's say they use magnesium sulfate in one of their blocks. Well, a year later, there's no magnesium sulfate in there because the price of magnesium sulfate has gone up and they found something cheaper that they can add to that block to fill it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we tell the gymnasts, we say, look, like you're breathing in toxic dust. We don't know what's in it. Our chalk doesn't have anything toxic in it. And second, you won't breathe it in because it settles.
Okay.
So I would claim that our chalk is even more healthy than average chalk because it doesn't have anything toxic in it and it doesn't remain in the air.
Okay. Well, James, I have taken up a little bit more of your time than I promised, but I don't apologize for that because this was actually a fascinating conversation for me. Like I said, I was really interested in the chalk thing and especially that last part too. So everybody who watched all the way to the end, you got something that the people who drop, there's like an average YouTube thing where people will watch up to like 10 minutes or whatever. Well, if they skipped out past that point, they missed all the part about how to actually use your chalk. Like you just gave a primer about how to use chalk and everything else that I thought was really, really valuable. And I really appreciate it. And you talked about the difference between White Widow and Black Widow, which was going to be my final question. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to change my final question. I know that you don't really do a lot of social media stuff, and so that doesn't really matter to you. But what does matter is people being able to purchase your product. If someone wants to purchase your product directly, either the Black Widow or the White Widow, where's the best place for them to go in order to purchase Spider Chalk?
Well, we like you purchasing off our website.
And so your website is spiderchalk.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so I'll put the link for your website in the description of this video.
Well, we like you purchasing off our website because we get to pack it. If you order from Amazon, which seems to be the most popular place to order things, Amazon has a tendency to get a really large 12-inch box, put a tiny little block of chalk in there, and then one air pillow. By the time it hits your doorstep, it's been banged around the box for 3 straight days. You get it, you cut the package open, and a bunch of powder comes out, even though you ordered the block. And so we tell people, we go, look, Amazon's great. They can deliver faster than we can, but they don't pack things the right way. It's not their block, right?
Yeah.
One air pillow, one block, send it off, one bottle of chalk, one air pillow. By the time it gets there, the cap is cracked, whatever. So we tell people, go, if you order from us, we're going to pack it the right way. Here's one last thing. It doesn't matter where you buy our chalk from, whether it's Rogue or whether it's PRX or whether it's Serious Steel or whether it's Amazon, eBay, or our website. We replace broken units. So if you get a block and it's broken, we replace it for free.